All right, so I would like to introduce Aarron now, because I've had a lot of preamble. So Aarron Walter is the general manager of new products at MailChimp, go MailChimp, and the author of Designing for Emotion, pretty relevant for today. So before joining MailChimp, he taught design at colleges in the US and Europe for nearly a decade. He's a frequent speaker at conferences around the world, and his design guidance has helped the White House, the US Department of State, and dozens of other startups and venture capitalists. So let's give a warm welcome to Aarron Walter.
Thanks for the intro, Blake. I'm pretty interested in this topic, empathy, so I'm excited that Creative Mornings is thinking about this not just here but around the world. As someone who's been thinking a lot about how design and emotion are interrelated, the topic of empathy is something I think about an awful lot. And over the years, I've noticed that although designers like to think that they're being empathetic with their audience, a lot of times they're really not. They're actually doing the exact opposite of being empathetic, which is to be apathetic. You think about how we design. We design in a vacuum, in a controlled space, where everything's just right, where we've got just the right monitor, just the right hardware, we've got just the right cup of coffee. Everything's perfect. And it turns out this is not the environment that our customers are in when they're using the things that we design. So it's really hard to be empathetic with our audience if we're not in that scenario. We're making a lot of assumptions that might not actually be accurate. So this word empathy, preparing for this talk, I did a little research about what that means. And the root of it is to go on a journey, to journey into the emotion of someone else. How are we making a journey into someone else's emotion if we're always sitting at our desk, always sitting in that chair, designing in a vacuum? Because it turns out the people that we're designing for, there's a lot of bad things happening. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of suboptimal conditions. There's a lot of interruptions. A lot of things that make it very difficult for them to complete a task. So if we're designing intelligently and being empathetic and taking this journey into their world, we're designing a protective space, something that helps them, builds affordances to avoid some of those interruptions and stress and helps them complete a task. And if we're doing our job really well, we're not just filing off the edges to make things work efficiently and be usable. We're also maybe creating a sense of empowerment, making them feel good about themselves, feel like I'm in charge of the technology, I'm dominating the technology, it's not dominating me. We have the opportunity to create a joyful experience for people. And to me, that's a really important thing to do in design. I like the way that Charles Ames describes the role of the designer. He said that the role of the designer is that of a very good, thoughtful host anticipating the needs of his guests. Anticipating the needs of his guests. How do we do that? How would we go about anticipating the needs of our guests? Well, if I were running a hotel, I would probably stay in my hotel and experience that. We have to walk a mile in their shoes to see what that's like. And their needs, we can break down these needs into two key categories. There are functional needs. So to extend Charles Ames' metaphor a little bit further here, If I'm in a hotel, the functional needs are when I wake up in the morning, I turn on the shower and I get hot water. And it doesn't matter how long I stay in the shower, I still get hot water. If I take a shower any time of day, I'm still getting hot water. I've got needs. I need it to be secure, so there's a lock on the door. I need a place to sleep. These are functional needs. But it's really not the reason we book a hotel room, usually. We have emotional needs, too. We need to feel a sense of escape. I don't know about you. I've got 2 kids. When I check into a hotel and it's just me, I'm watching Netflix. I'm relaxing and enjoying a little peace. So the idea of booking a hotel room is actually a very emotional experience. It's giving people an escape that they would not have otherwise. So we can think about what we can do going the extra mile to create an emotional experience. If you check into the Westin, you don't just get any pillow, you get a heavenly pillow, and I can attest that's a really fluffy pillow. You stay at the Ritz, and it's your birthday. When you check into your room, they're going to have a little something special in there for you because they're very attentive and great at customer service. These are the sorts of things that I've noticed in other industries, but in software and the web, the internet, a lot of us are in these industries. We often think so much about functional, and we forget emotional. So if we were to translate these adjectives into verbs to understand what design does, design helps people do something. Design makes people feel something. And when we're doing our work really well, we find a balance between those two. There's a value proposition here, a functional value proposition and an emotional value proposition. I want to compare 2 products that are very similar but totally different based on their value propositions and which end of the spectrum they sit. Honda Fit, does anyone own a Honda Fit? Okay. People like the Honda Fit. It's a great car. It's very value conscious. At $15,000 is usually where it starts. You can haul people around. You can put the back seats down, go to Home Depot, pick up a load of stuff for a project, drop the kids off at school, pick up a load of groceries. It's a very practical, value conscious car. It's economical. So this value proposition is strongly functional. But compare that to a Lexus. This is the RCF. It actually costs 4 times as much as the Honda Fit. But the functional value proposition is basically the same. I get in a car, it will take me places. I can do things in this. But the emotional value proposition, that's the difference here. When you drop your kids off at school in this, you look pretty cool, right? When you go on a road trip, it feels like luxury. The sound system is amazing. You're at a stoplight, you hit the gas, that thing goes, right? 4 times as much money is spent to buy this thing that does the same thing as the Fit. So to me, as a designer, I am always mystified when someone makes the case that we should focus only on function and not think about emotion, the way that people are going to feel when they make that purchase. We think about the mechanics of this, our brains and how we work. There's the doing part and there's the feeling part. And as humans, we like to romanticize the idea that our cerebral cortex is what makes us human. It's the thing that makes us different from all other animals on planet Earth. And we often think of our brainstem, where all the feeling happens, as lesser. It's weak. If you're very emotional, you're unstable. There's a lot of derogatory terms that get attached to emotion and feeling. In the cerebral cortex, where all this logic and reasoning happens, we like to think that when we make purchase decisions, behavioral decisions, that it all happens upstairs in that cerebral cortex that's so magical about being a human. But we know that's probably not true. Most of the time, when we make a purchasing decision or a behavioral decision, you ask someone, why did you choose that shirt? I don't know, it just felt right. It wasn't, because the weather, I looked at the weather and that was the right thing for the weather. Usually we don't even pay attention to these things. Emotion drives so much of our behavior, and we like to ignore it, but it turns out it's really powerful. In fact, there's a lot of money in recognizing emotion and how this doing and feeling part of what makes us human works together. The most valuable company on the planet, anyone know? Apple Computer, right? And there's a lot of strong projections they're going to be the first trillion-dollar company in history. They are setting revenue records every quarter. They're really good at function, the doing part, but they're exceptionally good at the feeling part. So much of the design of the devices is about the feel, and those Johnny Ive videos with the white background. I don't know where he is when he shoots all of those videos. But it's always, a lot of talking about the way it feels. It's our most something ever. It's the most personal thing. It's the most special thing we've ever made. It's all about feel. If we focus too much on functional and we forget about the emotional part of that brainstem, the way that we work as human beings, we miss out on some key benefits. It turns out that emotion and long-term memory are very closely coupled. They happen in the same spot, in the amygdala in your brain. You think about if you're designing a brand, what our goal is. We want to make people feel something and help them remember us so they come back and buy something again. They're repeat customers. They're loyal customers. Here's how memory, long-term memory, and emotion are linked. When you feel an emotionally charged event, when you experience an emotionally charged event, your first kiss, when you jumped out of an airplane, when you walked into your house after it had been broken in and you weren't sure if someone was still in the house. These are things that you remember. Time passes. But as you reflect on that event, you remember it with great detail. You remember color, smell, positions of items, the sound. All of these things come back so clearly. It turns out that this is a survival mechanism. If we're going to survive, we have to be able to remember the good and the bad, so we can repeat the good things, like eating a pound of bacon, and avoid the bad things, like getting robbed. So here's the science behind it. I'm going to call for some help here. Dr. John Medina, who wrote a really good book. It's called Brain Rules, and he tells us how this works, why emotion and memory fit together. He says that the amygdala is chock full of the neurotransmitter dopamine, and it uses dopamine the way an office assistant uses Post-it notes. When the brain detects an emotionally charged event, the amygdala releases dopamine into the system. It's out there. And because dopamine greatly aids memory and information processing, you could say the Post-it note reads, "Remember this." It's powerful. If we can start to be more empathetic, less apathetic about our customers, think about the emotional context, and create experiences that think beyond function and think about emotion, we can create long-term memories in our customers' brains. That's a very powerful thing, a powerful way to run a business. I actually kind of stumbled upon this whole principle and the science of this accidentally. I didn't study psychology. I actually studied painting, so sort of armchair psychologist. But in 2008, I was hired by Ben Chestnut, our founder, to join MailChimp and start a design team and do a big redesign of MailChimp. And I knew what it was like to be a MailChimp customer. I knew that experience very well because I'd been a customer since 2005. And I remembered very clearly what it was like to write an email that I was going to send to, in my case, a couple thousand people. I had to spend a lot of time writing and editing, designing assets, putting those things together, checking with colleagues, checking links. So by the time I got to pressing the send button, I was feeling a little nervous, but also very excited. It's a very emotional experience. If you've ever hit the send button on an email that's going out to a whole lot of people that cannot be sucked in, that's a potentially scary thing, right? So I wrote a little piece of copy on the campaign sent page. After you've pressed send and it's like, yep, everything's cool, it just said, high fives, your campaign's been sent. And the high fives message that I wrote back in 2008, it stayed there for years, and it just summed up the way I felt. I felt after I hit send and it's out, it's Miller time, right? So in 2013, we did a big redesign of MailChimp again, and it was an opportunity to revisit that thank you page. What's happening there? The copy still seemed accurate to us and to our customers. We do a lot of customer interviews, and we'd hear the same thing. They'd feel the same way. The emotional context was still, at that point, I'm feeling really good about sending. But we decided to add a little bit of animation and illustration to just show that feeling. Here's what it looks like to send an email. There's a bunch of check marks, everything's okay, we're feeling good. You get the sweaty chimp hand about to press the button. That's the way you feel. And then it's sent, and you get the high five. And you can actually click on Freddie's hand and give him another high five. And if you keep clicking, his palm will get redder and redder. So we spent a little time thinking about that. A little bit of programming, but really it didn't take us that long, and we just knew the emotional context very clearly because we used our product for a long time. And after we launched this, we thought people would notice it, but the reaction was surprising to us. We started to get tweets like this. People admitting that they like to high-five the screen. And they'd post photos and videos and GIFs of them high-fiving their screen. I even saw one where someone high-fived their iMac so hard the iMac tipped over. Clearly, this resonates emotionally with people. It makes them feel proud, I did it. It celebrates their sense of accomplishment. And it says, you can be a pro. You're dominating the technology's not dominating you. We just fast forward another year or so, and now if you do a quick search on Twitter for MailChimp High Five, it's a seemingly endless stream of confessions of high-fiving computers. Lots of GIFs, lots of videos. People love this. So we took that further, and we started to respond to some people because clearly it was resonating, and we would just reply to a few random people. We're amongst friends here, so don't share this with other people. We would reply and say, glad you had a good experience. What's your address? We want to just send you a little something special. And so on their doorstep would land a package with a high five t-shirt that turns that one-time experience of feeling like you're in charge of your life, you feel triumphant, into an artifact that you can wear daily to feel that way about your life. This person, Luke, he said, thanks MailChimp for the high five and Freddie swag. People are going to be high-fiving my chest all day long. I could see how that could get really inappropriate very quickly, but I'm glad that brought a smile to Luke's face. It even turned into a video game called Fast Fives. Fastfives.mailchimp.com, where you can, as quickly and accurately as possible, try to high five, and you get extra points if you also get the fist bump right. You don't want to high five the chicks. It's a fun, addictive game. There's actually an iOS app for this too. That experience turned into other artifacts too. It just sort of spiraled out of control. We made high five phone hands. So after you send an email campaign, you got this sitting on your desk, put on your high five hand, you go high five a colleague. These started to show up in parades around the city. What I like about these is you can actually modify them to express a lot of different types of emotions. So really multifunctional. The takeaway here for me is that when you spend a little time talking to customers, you can discover this emotional value proposition that's so meaningful to people, that's often overlooked, and it sets your brand apart, it sets your product apart, and it, more importantly, it just makes people feel good about using the things that you're making. How do we do this as creative people? Well, to bring us back to where we started, we step away from our chairs, step away from our desks, and we go talk to other people. It's the only way to empathize with people is to talk to them. The way that we do it is we keep a very close connection with our customers. We talk to them on the phone, we go visit them, we survey, we do usability studies, lots of different things. And along the way, I'm always looking for the oddballs, people that are using the product in a way that I didn't expect. I call these people weirdos. But they'll actually give you tips on the functional value proposition that you're missing, that you could be adding to your product. So that's how you find functional value propositions, but you also can get there by watching real people using your products. We do this, and it's painful. We squirm in our chairs as we watch people get confused and angry and lost in what they're doing. They feel dominated by the technology instead of dominating it. That causes us to run as fast as we can back to the studio, where we file off the edges to try to make the product better. We try to iterate to make it more useful all the time, more functional. We also get away from our desks, hop on planes, and travel. We go visit people where they work. We want to see their space. We want to see how they collaborate, see the hardware, experience the stress, the noise, the interruptions that shape the way that they use our product. Last year we traveled 100,000 miles to 3 different continents to talk to dozens of customers, just to listen and learn and find patterns. This is the best place to find the emotional value proposition that you might be missing, or maybe you're doing it really well. It's easiest to find emotional value propositions in person. You don't find that in a survey usually. So how do we do this as creatives? We get away from our desks. We go talk to people. We connect to people. If we're going to be empathetic, we have to live up to the meaning of that word, which is to journey into the emotions of another. I want to leave you guys with a quote that for me sums it up perfectly. And I take it with me every day when I go to work. Maya Angelou said, "People will forget what you said and they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget the way you made them feel." Right? Long-term memory and emotion, they're closely coupled. The only way we can make people feel something is with a little bit of empathy. Thanks, guys.
That's awesome. So good. Do a quick Q&A.
Okay.
All right, everybody. We're going to do... Hello? Check, check. Can we get this going, Cindy? Hello? We're going to do a quick Q&A. So I'll run this mic once it's hot. And you can ask a question, and Aarron will call on you.
Okay. Here comes Blake with the microphone. Yeah. Got right back here.
Penny, can we get this? Oh, hey. Thanks, Penny. Can we give a round of applause for Penny upstairs?
Hey, Penny.
Thanks, Aarron. That was a great talk, and it resonates with a lot of the things that I've been learning over the last 15 years as a copywriter. But I'm curious, since you're a designer and you're seeing things through the lens of design, what advice would you have for copywriters who want to incorporate more empathy, and what bad habits do you see copywriters falling into that are maybe ineffective?
I think copy is a really key thing. I've said many times that I think the interfaces are 90% copy. It's where clarity happens, where people figure out how to do things, but it's also a great opportunity to express personality and connect with people. I created this tool called a design persona that is essentially an exercise that you can do on your own or in a team to start to ask some questions that help you understand the personality of your brand and how that relates to your audience. Because once you understand who your audience is and who you are, you can communicate more effectively. You can start to define what your voice is and what's inbounds and what's out of bounds. So a design persona is a great thing to start with. If you Google it, you'll probably end up at my site where there's some guidance there. Kate Kiefer-Lee, who's a colleague of mine and has done a lot of thinking about voice and tone, brand voice, and how we write. She's a great writer. She's written a cool book called Nicely Said that would probably be your go-to answer for your question here. She created, with her team, a really cool guide called voiceandtone.com. And it's a guide that we use internally for how we write for MailChimp, but we put it out publicly because we felt like a lot of people were struggling with the same type of issues that, writing is design. It's a key part of design. So it explores a range of emotion and how we write for those different emotional contexts. Other questions? Right over here.
You expressed a lot of the joy that's inherent in using email marketing to connect with people. What suggestions do you have for companies that are using email to help build community with their audience? Or what examples have you seen of companies doing this really well?
Of building community?
Yeah, through email.
I don't know if I have a specific example of that. But I will say that emotional context, which I touched on, is the key here. Knowing your audience and knowing how they feel at these different junctures when interacting with your brand, your company, organization, that will help you understand how to write, how to design. It's not all fun and games. It's not all jokes. That can be really inappropriate if you're a bank or you're a healthcare company and people are in a high-stress situation. Misplaced joke will actually not make people feel good about you. It'll create a really negative experience, and they will not forget that. So it can backfire on you if you're not sensitive to those emotional shifts. So the context is really important. Sometimes the emotion you want to create is that of trust. Sometimes it is one of like, we understand this is a really difficult time. TurboTax is actually surprisingly kind of good at this. When you file your taxes and you report a loss of a spouse, they actually say, I'm sorry for your loss in the validation. And it's not, heavy-handed. It's just a small kindness that I think is kind of cool that they do that, just to acknowledge it. That's why I moved away from Philadelphia, actually, because they wouldn't, if you go buy a beer on your birthday, they wouldn't say happy birthday to you when you check out. Here, they'll say happy birthday to you, right? Yeah. Go Atlanta.
More questions? We'll do two more.
You talked about emotional versus functional needs of people. Right now, I'm trying to design a non-classroom environment for students to work but also relax. Do you think when designing, someone should focus more on functional or emotional needs, and how can I achieve a balance?
So I think that it's not a one-size-fits-all that you should do this or that, but you should consider, to use that example of the Honda Fit versus the Lexus RCF. They're both successful vehicles. In fact, the Honda Fit may have made more money for the company. It focuses on a functional value proposition because that's appropriate for the audience and what they need. They are doing the research, talking to people about the challenges in their life, and they make a product that solves that problem. And sometimes, when you need to get your first car, there is an emotional value proposition, but it's mostly connected around utility. So just being aware of knowing your audience and knowing what sort of latitude you can take is key.
Do one more.
Yeah. Right over here.
Hi. So I know that MailChimp people are really open to these ideas and these kind of creative and surprise and delight moments, but how do you stress the importance in an organization where that's not inherent and you're not working with a bunch of creatives, you're working with people who don't see the value in it? What tips do you have for getting people on board with that?
Yeah, it wouldn't be a talk about emotion if I didn't get that question. Yeah, so it can be a challenging thing sometimes because people focus so carefully on function, and they don't really, they're all about cerebral cortex and return on investment. I wrote a chapter about this in the tail end of my book. I'm not trying to be a shill here, but I hear this question a lot. And what I've found is that these people tend to be analytical, and numbers are seductive to them, even though lies can be told with numbers as well as they can be with things of feeling. So small experiments are generally what I advise people to start with. A small thing where you can run it for a limited time. You can do it hopefully without a whole lot of red tape and permissions. Can we do this? And you could potentially quantify that in some way. Not every experiment is very quantifiable. So for example, the high five, how would we lobby for, I think this is worth our time? We wouldn't. Our CEO is a designer, and he gets this stuff, and he really just sort of has this open playing field that is a luxury that we enjoy daily. But it is a good example, an example that's a small thing that does have a serious quantifiable piece. Like if you do that search in Twitter, try to go count the tweets. It's a lot of tweets. What is the value? What's the return on investment for a company that makes space for emotion? It's pretty huge. There are examples like Apple. That's a really compelling example to me. That a company that it's not just a company that's pretty good. It's the company that makes the most money. It's like the numbers that are the most compelling from the company that pays the most attention to emotion. Those can be persuasive, but my advice is don't feel compelled to revolutionize your company. Start small, try an experiment, see if there's a way to quantify with maybe a tool like Optimizely or Google Analytics. Try something out and see what happens, and get away from your desk and talk to people.
Let's give Aarron a round of applause.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.